Toys are an amazing and fun opportunity to educate the new generations. Unless they are dinosaur toys, then it's an absolute free-for-all. Hey everyone! Dinosaur toys are one of the very first things that got many of us interested in biology. But sadly, toys are not always accurate, because of faulty, outdated information, or just not giving a dinosaur. But what if these inaccuracies were a product of these toys being their own organisms and not dinos at all? Let's find out. Please like, subscribe and hype to prevent us from going extinct. And now, without further ado, let's get started. We've met many kinds of pets during the course of our studies. And how can we not? Humans love bonding with all sorts of organisms. But sometimes people strive for something out of the ordinary. Today's animals were not made by evolution, nor were they made in a lab. These are, instead, born from the Cathoga ecosystem, a place where a bioarchitect fungus alters life around itself in order to perpetuate its own life cycle, giving rise to organisms from the predatory Cathoga itself to the mighty Slurpasaurs. The animals we're meeting today are not a big part of this ecosystem, merely accidents of the fungus process, which were found by explorers and taken to be studied. And after a particular company expressed interest in these creatures, mass breeding and commercialization of these amazing organisms began, causing them to become very popular pets among the populace. Let us meet some of them. Among the most popular of these creatures, for rather obvious reasons, are those that resemble theropod dinosaurs, despite how light the actual resemblance is. A quick look will show an upright, kangaroo-like posture, but lacking the lower body anatomy that would allow such a posture to be held continuously, as well as a rounded head, quite poor for catching and holding massive prey, and limbs that lack the claws one such animal could need. See, despite the apparent resemblance, these animals are not theropods at all, but an altered species of salamander. They can stay upright only by virtue of its tail being much heavier, not quite allowing them to run bipedally, but merely propping them up for short amounts of time, to the unending glee of children all over the world. Most fascinating about these organisms is, being amphibians, it became customary for companies to sell the dried, dormant eggs of these animals. By just adding water, any child could watch the miracle of life as the eggs broke open and a tiny dinosaur-looking thing emerged, becoming larger and developing after a short stay in the water. This is, in fact, common to many of these animals, as the decalcification caused by their anomalous anatomy and physiology causes their eggs to be soft and porous, needing a liquid medium to remain alive. Yeah, a miracle. I have another word for it. But anyway, let's move on to our next dino. Sauropods are some of the largest beings to ever exist, which makes it funny to see them this small. And once you look closely, you'll notice the weird parts. The limbs are much more splayed out, and the tail is not held upright, balancing the neck. In fact, the neck is much more flexible than that of a real sauropod, twisting and turning around it to detect and reach prey. Yes, prey. This is not a herbivore, but a voranid, curiously enlarged and stretched into this anomalous body plan. Not quite as helpless as other similar organisms, these false sauropods are still capable of running and looking for prey in hard-to-reach places, stopped only by their inability to climb. Not a good pet for first-timers, but a very interesting animal to care for and observe nonetheless. Now for another not quite herbivore, here's a Stegosaurus, and you'll notice when looking at it some rather significant deviations from the ancient ones. A large head with long jaws, a body too slender for a herbivore that needs to process huge amounts of food, and plates that alternately bend from one side to the other instead of being held vertically along the dinosaur's back, as is accepted to have been nowadays. All of this is explained by the fact that these stegos are, in fact, tiny crocodilians, rarely growing larger than the newborns of others of their kind. Their arched look is a way for them to look larger in order to intimidate potential predators, as well as protecting them since, in the case of an attack, it is more likely to hit the most armored part of their bodies, the dermal plates on their back, likely derived from the DNA of Scyllas that got stranded after the loss of their habitat. While they hold this position, their tails will obviously drag along the ground, merely a result of the way their column is bent. And, of course, their carnivore dentition is retained, although the much lower muscle density of their jaws means they have much weaker bites, feeding on insects and small vertebrates, and not representing a danger to children that got them as a gift. Let's follow up with another classic, a pteranodon. Despite not being dinosaurs, they often get lumped with them, and it makes sense. They are still prehistoric reptiles after all. Unlike real pterosaurs, these tiny creatures are scaly and naked, lacking the pycnofibers of the real ones, and have an upright position as opposed to the quadrupedal stance of actual pterosaurs, as well as, ironically enough, teeth, despite the name pteranodon meaning toothless wing. That's because this creature is derived from a lizard, more specifically an anole, explaining most of these characteristics. And speaking of wings, despite the fact we weren't speaking of wings, the wings of these animals have a much more bat-like quality to them compared to those of real pterosaurs, a result of them being derived from mammalian features, with a skin membrane extended between the digits and limbs. These wings are not as efficient as those of a real pterosaur, nor is the animal's body adapted to flight either, meaning they can only leave the ground through excessive, energetically costly flapping. But hey, at least they can stand upright, something no pterosaur could do. Now let's end with a bang, with a facsimile of the objectively best dinosaur to ever exist, Triceratops. Indeed, their resemblance is astounding, but a few noticeable differences give it away. The typical dragging tail, a wavy frill along the back, longer, splayed-out toes, and also this very weird-looking beakless mouth, more like that of a lizard than the one on an actual ceratopsian. Of course, you'll notice this is not a dinosaur at all. I know, a shocker by this point. No, this is a chameleon. While its stiffer legs and straight tail prevent it from moving along the branches like its relatives, it's still perfectly capable of moving along the forest floor, feeding on whatever dead animals it can find. It needs to do this because the alterations it suffered have deprived it of its powerful tongue and eyesight. Luckily, its hardened head crest will provide good protection against predators, and its three horns, already present in many chameleons, will give it a good weapon too. Given their poor eyesight, they will automatically ram anything they perceive as a potential threat. And that's it for a speculative biology look into some inaccurate dinosaur toys. So, with this one, the concept was rather simple. Since in the channel we love turning toys into living beings, what would it be like to adapt them into real animals, inaccuracies and all? I suppose you can consider this a spiritual sequel to our Weird Fossils video, which we'll get a sequel to, don't worry about it. And we also discussed what other things could be tied into the episode, including those dinosaurs that grow on water from small eggs. As for the origin of these creatures, a couple ideas were floated around, including time travel, but in the end we felt making them regular organisms modified by the Cothaga fungus worked well, as it was stated before to have created Slurpasaurs, those horrible dinos from old movies. And that was a very fun tie-in to base our dinos on. As for the models we used, we talked at length about this over on our Patreon Discord. Please join. discussing a variety of possible subjects until we finally clocked in on the ones you saw today. I hope you enjoyed this one, and let me know if you'd be interested in watching more inaccurate animals be reimagined on the channel. As always, huge thanks to anyone who wanted to see some more inaccurate dinos. And of course, thank you to our researchers and research associates who support us through Patreon and YouTube memberships. Remember, you too can join in if you want to support our channel, and you get some nice perks too, like seeing all of our creatures and videos ahead of time and helping mold them into shape. Or you can also like, subscribe, or write a comment telling me any type of creature you'd like me to give the Spekivo treatment in the show. Any of those really help the channel a lot. Thank you all for watching, and see you next time on the Speculative Wildlife Research Center.